Greetings, attendees. Look at your testing framework. Now look at ours. Look at theirs. Look at ours. Look at yours. Look at ours. This is the testing framework you'd want to adopt. Yeah, I'm on a horse. Dun, 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 dun. Right. So.
We have mics for the audience, too. So when you have questions or have something to say, we'll take them as they come.
Yeah, we're mic'd up now. You can hear us, too?
Cool.
Okay, good.
Yay.
We'll give it a few more minutes. People are tired. And actually, I can't wait until they finish the other Moscone buildings so we don't have west and south. That's if you're leaving a west or a south session and you want to make it to a west or south, the opposite, that's quite a hike with a short time frame. What?
Burr has been back and forth.
A bunch of times?
Yeah. Like, I'm over here, now I'm over there, now I'm over here, now I'm over there.
Now I'm on a horse. I'm not saying that on the mic.
Food.
It's probably a set menu given the conference facility. There's probably a one and only caterer that you can use.
You got a slide advancer?
Yeah.
Cool.
Actually, yeah, since we don't even have to be at the computer, why don't we just stay down? So is it okay, camera guy, can you actually get down there? Would you like us to use your name, or are you good with camera guy? Okay. Camera professional? Camera engineer.
Ooh.
Nice. How about director of camera engineering for room, what room are we, 207?
Yeah.
Yeah, director of camera for 207.
Nice. We've got our director of audio back there.
Yeah, the director of audio. You can now put that on your CV or your resume. I am a director. All right.
We've got a good turnout.
I know, this is pretty good. All right. They closed the door, so I guess we should get started.
Fair enough.
Okay. So hi, I'm Steve.
I'm Jason.
And we're going to talk to you today about testing with microservices. Right? This title came out because everybody they think microservices are the best thing ever, and then they start actually implementing microservices, and then they
go, oh crap, I have to test this. What do I do?
Yeah, and then there's a ton of stuff. Like I can't just do JUnit anymore, right? That is no longer sufficient. So that's the title.
Or if you thought JUnit was sufficient.
You no longer do.
Yeah.
This bit.ly link down here is to the actual slides. They're just Google slides, so you can look at them at your leisure. We will also have that URL at the end if you decide the talk was worthwhile and you actually want to come back to them. There's a lot of links in here for you to follow up on stuff. Or not a lot, a few. Right?
Yeah, a few.
A few people. All right, so let's get started. Oh, now actually I have to see stuff because I haven't memorized my slides. So the goals, the goals for today are understand the different types of testing for microservices architecture. Know when to use them. So there's a bunch of different, it's not just JUnit anymore, or maybe just even JUnit and integration testing. There's a lot more, so you need to think about them. Add tools to your toolbox, right? That's the whole point. Everything you learn, these are all tools. Microservices is a tool for how to do your application. Sometimes it makes sense to use that tool, sometimes it doesn't, and we're going to talk about testing in the same way. You don't always have, just because you know how to use a hammer, the whole world is not a nail.
That's right.
Thank you.
Yay.
Good job. And nice interaction, too.
We have a good audience.
Yeah.
Yay!
The prerequisites is you know what an MSA is and means. Like that, either you're read about it. We're not going to go over what microservices is. Is that fair? At this point in the evolution of tech and the fact that it's like a specific talk, we felt like that was a fair assumption. You have testing experience in a language. You actually know what a test is. Is that okay? You don't have to be doing TDD. You don't have to be doing all of it. Just work, because we'll go over some of the concepts and what they mean.
That's you, Jason.
Who's Jason that just walked in?
Jason Brock, one of our
okay.
designers.
Nice. The other prerequisite is you will ask questions. Are we good on that? Okay. We're not the only ones working here.
Yep.
And you're going to have to endure some bad jokes, as you are probably already well aware. All right? So that's it.
Are we good with that? Everyone good?
Okay.
Awesome.
You go.
Cool. All right. I'm up. Cool. All right. First bit. Why should we care? Why should we care about testing in general?
This is the question part.
Yeah. Query. Why should we care about testing in general? Forget the whole microservices, just in general. Why do we care about testing?
Check
Check our stuff works. Okay. What else? Yeah. Fair enough. Yep. Okay.
More time
I'll give you
developing,
that.
less time fixing. I will repeat their phrases since the room swallows sound.
Ah, very good. Any others? Not piss off the boss.
Not
Very
piss off the boss, good.
When it broke. Yes, that is a very good one. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well. Any other reasons? Yep.
Well, when things slow down.
When things slow down?
When a customer or your user calls up and say, what's the matter?
Sure.
Why is it taking 30 seconds where it was 2?
Right. Right, very good. I'm going to throw one out. Maybe you've thought about it, maybe not. One of the reasons for testing as well is so you can refactor stuff.
Yeah.
If I don't have any tests, I don't know whether or not this works, I really, really don't want to sit there and refactor code. If I have no idea what this does, what it's supposed to do, I ain't touching it.
I mean, that was one of the big things about unit testing in the beginning, right? You can refactor with security.
Yep.
Or whatever the other phrase is. Wait, but no one said the magic phrase, so I don't break in production. Did anybody say that? Did anybody think that?
No, I didn't hear that.
So it works,
right?
Okay, but that's a little bit different. There's the works, and then does it break? No one feels that way. No one tests because they're like, oh, once I test, I'm all good. Yeah.
Aren't you doing it in production?
We'll get to that.
Ooh.
We'll get to that.
You're jumping ahead. You're way ahead.
Yeah.
Here.
All right. Welcome to volunteering to talk.
Alrighty. Who's familiar with Martin Fowler? Does that name sound familiar? Cool. Yes, a bunch of people. All right. This is his kind of where you should spend your time testing microservices kind of pyramid, from lots of time down here at the bottom of the pyramid all the way up to, kind of hit it a little bit kind of stuff. And we'll touch on pretty much most of this. So that's his kind of take on where you spend your time, why you do it kind of stuff. And we'll get into some of that as well.
So how much does that match up with what you're doing today? I mean, you may not know all the terms, but are most of you spending most of your time on unit testing right now? Still writing unit tests?
See some head nods.
Yeah.
My pyramid's upside down at work.
It is really?
Ooh, yes.
Yeah, we're not doing enough unit, doing a lot more.
Exploratory?
Yep.
Well,
Does
and
that match up with anyone else? Is anyone else's pyramid inverted? Yeah.
And actually, we'll get to this, and that actually may not be a bad thing with microservices in a certain way.
Ours looks more like a Mayan pyramid where it goes up and
Then it stops. Someone cut off the top of your... Isn't that a ziggurat or something like that?
Yeah.
It's gone?
The top half. We've got unit and integration and done. Okay. All right. Very good. Anything else? Any other comments, questions from people?
We'll go over what all these terms mean if you don't know them already, okay?
Next up, unit test. Good old standby friend, right? Who's familiar with the unit test? I hope to see every hand up. If
Doesn't
not,
mean you have to
we're in
do it.
trouble.
You just at least need to know what it is.
Okay. Who's going to be the brave soul to give me a quick Reader's Digest, like 30-second elevator pitch for what a unit test is? All right,
Yeah,
cool.
Thanks, Jason.
Here, come up to the mic.
Unit testing is testing code from the inside out. So the base code, making sure that the method works.
Okay. How big is a unit test?
It should cover all your false positives.
Cover false positives.
But it's about a bit.
Okay.
You use the magic phrase, which is a method, right? It's basically. Go ahead.
Yeah. It covers a method. You can obviously have more to cover a whole class or whatnot, but that's the idea. It covers a method or an atomic piece of code that you're able to test in isolation. Fair enough? Okay. Very good. Here's a basic looking unit test, right? This is JUnit. Anyone not familiar with Java? Not that it matters, but
So we can keep using Java examples for most of this? Okay.
for our one example that we have up here.
Well, and also the other things are primarily like the integration and...
Oh, right. Yep. So it's a test. It makes sure that our greeter code, so you can kind of infer what this is doing, what it looks like in the back end, right? We've got some sort of class that has a create greeting and a greet, and that's about it, right? So we're testing very small little bits of code, and we want to make sure that it looks right. Good news, in microservices, that doesn't change. Same idea, same thing. So that's the good news.
You don't get to stop writing them though either. right? It's not like,
Right.
oh, I moved to microservices, I don't have to unit test anymore. They're
Yep.
still there, and they're just exactly the same. So you don't have to learn anything new there.
Yep. Alrighty, integration tests. You want to take this one?
Sure, I'll take integration tests. Although this is the one I can never remember the two. So integration is to unite or combine. I can't remember if this is the one that uses the mocks or not. So this is This is the testing against boundary layers, right? And this is actually where we're actually really starting to test microservices, right? So test against persistent stores, test against gateway boundaries, right? So you're actually testing against, with microservices, they each have their own database. If you're a microservice Safarian, right, and you do it exactly like each service has its own data store, you want to actually be testing. If I do a unit test, like with a mock or a stub, and say, hey, does it actually work with the database and there's a mock or a stub, how helpful is that in a microservice? Okay, did everybody lose the ability to speak at once? It's like I got a lot of head shakes and frowny faces. I'm guessing most people, those are translates to not very much at all, right? In production, the fact that I could mock that means nothing, right? In production, it means I actually could talk to the database and I could bring all this stuff together. And they need to be fast, right? So, oh, but it uses mocks. Is this the one? Did I get it wrong again?
No, you're good.
No,
Well, see, one of the main things, there's a lot of ideas and ideology around things. A lot of it is kind of in the gray zone, depending on who you talk to, right? Which author you talk to. This was Fowler's thing.
And I'm going back to this basic component test. Is that the one that no, I did the right one. Integration is the component test is the one where you don't even have a real database, right? That's where you just mock it out. Do you guys do that today, where you're just like, or you mock out the network layer? Do you guys do those kinds of tests now? Okay, no? No? Good. Because in microservices, my personal very strong opinion is those are useless. What's the point, right? If it doesn't actually, the whole point of microservices is everything gets unbundled. And we'll get to this in a second, I think. Maybe I get to it with even this one. Right, you integrate the boundary layers. There's some things you can use, and we'll get to this in a second about why component testing is useless. Right, yeah?
You're missing out sort of behavior-driven development and sort of cucumber type testing. Do you not do that in microservices?
You can.
You can.
Why wouldn't you?
Well, no, it's just you seem to me you kind of jump from units, because I would go TDD, BDD, and then integration testing.
Okay.
You just kind of skipped it. I just wondered if
Like I said, depending on who you talk to, which advocate you listen to, it all depends on which way you've got.
There's nothing to stop you from doing it.
Right. And at the end of the day, if you've got something that's working for you, keep at it.
Yeah. I think what we're trying to get to, though, is that when you get to microservices, some of the tests you used to do that you think were important because they were in a monolith and you wanted to test that stuff out no longer matter anymore. Because when you go to deploy this, that stubbing or mocking is useless. The whole point is with microservices, everything becomes disconnected, right? And you can't rely on things that you could have relied on before. Does that make sense? So this is mainly the file system, the database, the network, etc., things that don't live in memory is what you're doing with that. Component tests, yeah. This is the stuff, what are your boundaries? Test them without crossing those boundaries, right? Use mock stubs and memories. I think I would disagree with Fowler about these. I find these to be useless for the most part in microservices. I mean, it's good to see if your code is coherent internally, but in terms of what's actually going to happen when you put this into production, it doesn't actually get you most of what you want. So a component test, you're using mocks or stubs or in-memory for the file system and stuff. Yeah?
What's the difference then if we use component test with unit test? Because if we mock the component test, it should be the same thing as unit test.
No, so the unit test is supposed to be an independent function, right? A component test is you're testing some sort of functionality, but removing like the network. You're not testing the network layer, or can you actually talk to the database, but you're testing the entire thing. Unit test is really like the atomic unit inside of your code. Do you see the difference there? Yeah. Does anybody want to argue with me about that? No? You guys are boring. This is obviously San Francisco. How about you know what we'll do? We'll put that idea in a parking lot. We'll socialize it around for a little bit.
This should be Summit next year in Boston, right?
That's right, and we'll build some consensus around. We'll try to build some consensus around that idea. and then we'll revisit it. I can speak California really well. You could, except microservices, every microservice I built can't live without the network. Does that make sense? I mean, you could say that the component is the service itself, right? You could, and you could mock out all the connections of that service to everything else. But for me, like, if I'm doing a user service and it talks to a data store, without being able to actually talk to the data store, the service doesn't actually exist. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but, so that might be okay, right? If your microservices have one data store and their data store, right?
Right.
You can expand it a little. So you have a boundary, but is it really a boundary because only that microservice talks to that data store?
Right, so you could say the component is the entire, so are what you're saying is the component is the entire microservice now? Yeah, I could see that. I mean, again, these are names, and names are only helpful in as much as they help us make a concept clear or communicate something. So if you want to redefine it that way and it works well for your team, go for it. I guess the thing I'm arguing against is putting a lot of effort into tests which mock databases and mock network layers. You can do some, so I'm not saying you should do them, not do them if they really work for your team and your testing people are like, yeah, we have to live with component tests. I'm just saying don't put as much emphasis. They're not as important when you're going to microservices. Say it again.
How would you test edge cases, like server resets and...
That comes later. You can't do that with a mock.
You can mock it any way you want.
Okay, agreed.
So now you're testing the functionality. I think the happy path testing, I agree with you, but if you want to really test out some really corner cases and stuff, mock them.
That's a very good point. How many people have done tests or seen tests in your code base where the only thing I'm testing is happy path? Yeah, right. Testing those edge cases and then the sad path and whatnot brings a lot of value to the table. Or you can even go so far as to use, what's Netflix?
Chaos
thing?
Monkey.
Yeah, Chaos Monkey. Hey, let's spin something up. Let's just throw something funky at it and see what happens. There's value in that too.
Does anybody not know what Chaos Monkey is? Okay, thank you for being brave. Chaos Monkey is, Amazon, Netflix runs everything in Amazon, right? And how often does an availability zone or something like that go down in Amazon? Well, yeah. So Netflix basically said we have to start testing and they do microservices. They're like, we have to start testing our microservices so that we can be resilient to that kind of stuff. So they wrote a framework called Chaos Monkey, and basically they unleash it on their network while it's live in production. And basically what it does is proceeds to start taking out availability zones, takes out the network layer, gets rid of EBS. Like, it just basically goes in and causes chaos in their network, and then they want to see how resilient their entire network is to that chaos.
I think it's called Simian Army.
Sorry?
I think it's called Simian Army, right?
Simian Army? Well, is that like a bunch of Chaos Monkey then?
Yes.
Yeah. No, sorry.
There's different sizes of monkeys.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, no, or different grouping sizes. Like Simian Army goes through with availability zones. Is that what it does?
Oh, yeah. I mean, take this service down, take this VM down, take this region down.
Right.
Right.
So that's what Netflix does. And that came out of being in microservices also as well, right? And being in a distributed architecture. But I agree with you about the non-happy paths. I'm just saying you can do that without having to mock, though, too, right? You can actually do it. Like, change the IP address of one of your database. Watch what happens automatically. Like, so if you move to something like Kubernetes, you can script that kind of stuff.
Right.
Right?
You are a little bit more of a controlled environment with a mock or a stub, though.
That's true. It's true. And it can be faster.
Would like circuit breaker type testing come here, or is that a different layer?
So if we go with the example of a service being a component, then circuit breaker would be here, right? You would be checking to see, I'm assuming that microservice, no, not here, it would be more integration. This service goes away, I need to talk to this service. I don't know. This is the part where I have a problem between component and integration testing in a microservices way. Like, it gets much more fuzzy.
Where do you draw that line?
Yeah. Any other questions or comments on this? No?
Nope.
Okay. Yeah.
I think we beat that one to death.
I think we did too. Contract test.
Cool. Contract testing. Has anyone done this stuff before? We got one, going once, twice, three times. Cool.
So then how do you do, okay, so, well, how do you guys do
go ahead.
microservices without contract testing? Because watch what you see what contract testing is.
Okay. Contract test. We want, it's not an integration test, but what you want to check is you want to check that the required input is there and it matches the required output. This is a big one. Well, verify response times, but ideally, do I actually have a pointer? I think I do. Woo, look at this. We're all cats now. Ideally, consumers, you would contribute your tests back upstream. Now, I know this doesn't usually happen, especially if you're using a third party, like who's going to contribute their stuff to the GitHub version 3 API? Anyone? Yeah, well, maybe, but not very often. But ideally, you do something like that.
Do you know what so do you guys get what a contract test is?
Because I'm covering it right now.
Okay, there you go, sorry. I didn't memorize it's that, exactly.
Yeah. The idea here is we've got a producer that produces some sort of output, right, for a given set of input. And maybe consumer A and consumer B care about part of it, and consumer C cares about all of it. But I want to make sure that you're going to follow the contract. At no point do I send in ABC and get back DEF when I'm expecting XYZ. Does that make sense? So I want to verify that what I'm sending in matches what I'm expecting out. And if you contribute those back upstream, then the third party that you're integrating with can go, oh, okay, now we understand what you guys are doing. Oh, and by the way, we're going to change the contract, right? How many times have you programmed against version 1 and then 3 months later they rolled out version 2, right? How many times has that happened and they didn't tell you? Yeah. Right.
So this is why I'm asking, like, how are you doing microservices inside of your company without this? I mean, this is one of the fallacies that we all kind of did with a monolith that kind of gets exposed when you move to microservices, is that nothing ever changes in APIs. Like, because you have to actually communicate across services, unless it's the same team doing all the microservices, in which case, why don't you just go back to a monolith anyway? You have to communicate around what you expect to send and what you expect to receive. And so without this kind of testing, this is a really good way for you to set yourself up for a lot of failure. How many of you have encountered failure because you didn't coordinate well around what was getting passed and received? Yeah, this is critical in microservices. So I'm going to beat this one to death, like I already just did. So.
It's just, I mean, because this wasn't shown like in the pyramid there, so because this doesn't really seem like
Contract tests weren't in there?
if I missed it, sorry.
No, you're right. It wasn't.
Yep, no, it's not there. That's going to be like in between end-to-end and component in this pyramid, right?
Yeah, I didn't really see, because we do this, but I don't really see this as a step. It's really more of like a strategy, I would say, because this even starts at the unit level, where you say if you have, a function or a resource or whatever like that, that we strictly look for very specific inputs.
Right.
That match that input. Well, all we really need to test is what do we do when the input doesn't match what we expect when the output
Yep.
doesn't match what we expect. So that starts at the unit test level. So we can do
Sure. Yeah, it can.
unit test level. We need to make sure that we know exactly what we're getting. And if it
But
doesn't match it, it's a failure.
It's a bit different between unit tests and contract testing. Unit testing is within your realm of control, right? You control that code. There's one team working on that code base. What the real point of contract testing is contracts between two service providers, right? Or a service provider and a consumer. So this is actually at the cross-team level, right? This is where contract testing really comes when you're going across teams. Yeah.
So we've been calling this integration testing. So how does
Okay.
So do we have another slide for integration testing? I can't remember.
No, we covered it before.
Right.
We've
Sorry.
said it before. Name, what's in a name, right? Can this be an integration test? Sure. Traditionally, though, your integration test is going to be smaller subsystems coming together to form a main cohesive entity. Not necessarily the whole thing works, and we verify input and output. Usually, that's what it is. But if you guys want to call this integration testing, great. Just make sure everyone calls it unit testing on your team.
Yeah, and the other thing about this, have you guys heard of OpenAPI or Swagger? Right, so for those, it used to be called Swagger, now it's OpenAPI, right? That is a great, it's probably in our tools you should use, right? Yeah. Swagger is one of those great tools to do that, right? It allows you to specify in a JSON or YAML? I can't remember. You can, in YAML, I hate YAML though. I wish they'd let you do it in both, yeah, exactly. So don't do it in YAML because YAML is garbage. Do it in JSON, another flag I'm going to put to the mast. You can specify what the API is, what it sends and receives, and then you can both generate stubs on the producer side and stubs on the receiver side. And you can say, look, you can't change anything in your code without changing the JSON to actually update the contract. And and we're going to test against that document, right?
There were some other questions people had. Yeah.
Well, I was just wondering if you would also use this for verifying SLAs.
Why not?
It's not it's not generally done. I don't think that's not generally, but you could. You could put in a response time requirement around that contract. Right. But the OpenAPI won't give you that, right? It'll just give you a contract of, I'm going to send this and you're going to give me back this.
Right. Any other questions? Yes?
Well, so yeah, we're doing Swagger too, or OpenAPI. So again, like you said, it's basically just the contract, that's sort of the specification. But is there any framework that builds off of that where, I guess I don't know, it kind of like automatically maybe generates input for you to say like, I'm gonna hit you. Specification and see if there's failure without you having to write it yourself.
Has anybody else come across something like that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's all manual testing. I mean, you write
Right.
Yeah.
but you don't hit the Swagger.
You actually hit the endpoint.
To match the specification against yours.
You
Yeah.
can create projects in SoapUI and then run command line by main. So you can then have them as scripted forms.
Did everybody hear that? It's called SoapUI. Is that what it's called? Yeah, and then you can use Maven to drive the test. Is that what you were saying?
You can create a project file to have your happy path and your error path, and then you can run Maven or some other build type tool to then run those up.
Put it in a cron job, dude. Postman also.
I mean, I know SoapUI runs this. Yeah, I've dealt with SoapUI, but like I said, it doesn't create the test.
You want something to just like feed it the Swagger, and it's going to go, I'm going to randomly generate some strings and
Hmm.
so that you can look at whether the Swagger contracts meet. That doesn't get to whether it actually obeys what it says it's going to obey.
Yeah, you're trying to get away from a human having to write the test or human having to visually compare it.
Right.
Because it's either you're going to miss it or you're not going to do it.
Right, so here's the thing. I think it's going to end up being, right now, I think it's going to be like unit tests. I mean, don't forget microservices, they're probably 7 years old at this point, but really they're about 3 years old, right? And there's still a lot of evolution. And so even now, people still write, you can get the stubs for the JUnit test, but people still write the test inside the test, right? I don't think we're going to get away from people having to write the test inside the test. Maybe we can stub it out at some point, but actually writing that test, I think, will come later.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the tool that does it, but it sounds like a great open source project.
Yeah, dude. Wait, what company are we looking for this coming from? USAA, great. That's good. We expect that sometime soon. Take care of our veterans and our contract tests. Thank you.
What do we got? Contract tests, yeah. Response request, did that. End-to-end tests. All right. This is mostly manual, right? I mean, you may have some, why did I just draw a blank? Selenium tests that do the whole thing, right? But for the most part, this is going to be someone actually sits there and does it. Maybe they eventually automate it, but this is like, go over here, click over here, make sure this element's over here, blah, blah, blah. Like the whole thing. Stand up the whole enchilada and test it end to end, right? Which, unfortunately, is not usually feasible all the time, right? Especially if you're going to be integrating with X number of third-party APIs, right? Hey, could you guys please stand up a testing instance for us that we can use and maybe take down and screw up? Is that something you guys could do for us, maybe, possibly? How many people have had to integrate with like authorize.net or any other credit card processing thing? Yeah. Not like, here's your testing instance. Don't screw it up, right? Use these 4 credit cards with these 4 names and make sure everything's good. You're not going to get your own dedicated testing instance to take a look at. All right, some of the issues, and I'm sure you guys have hit this one. They're difficult to write. How many people love doing that? All right, so here's our 15 steps that we go through. Make sure we run all of these, right? Everyone hates that. They're slow, and especially if you're testing at the UI level, they're brittle. Anyone found how brittle end-to-end testing can be with like Selenium or whatnot? Oh, hey, we changed the CSS, and that element no longer has that class or whatever, or it's a different color.
Or the pixel moved one element over, and now it's blue rather than red on the picture that I'm trying to get, right?
Yeah, all of those kinds of things could potentially break your end-to-end tests.
There's tools to help, right, where you can record your web browser session, but it's not easy.
Yes, it is. Although the problem that a lot of people have is they end up using it as a catch-all, right? So maybe I wrote a few unit tests, but you know what? Forget it. I'll catch it in end-to-end testing. And then you end up with your inverted pyramid where all of your tests are end-to-end tests. And it takes you 6 hours to run your battery of tests against a three change in your source control, right? Yeah. The one single line where someone forgot a semicolon, right? That kind of stuff. Things that people have used in the past, I'm sure a lot of these are familiar. We talked about Selenium. Robots. Has anyone seen, like, if you're doing an app, has anyone seen robots that actually do this? Where they've actually got a robot that, like, touch over here, make sure this button's here, like, slide over here. It happens. or you end up doing the, like, the emulator software that does the same kind of thing.
Mechanical Turk.
Yeah. We've got JMeter here. Anyone familiar with JMeter? Knows what it does? Cool. You may not think of it as an end-to-end test. Most people think of it as I'm going to hit it with a load, so I'm going to do it as a load generation. You can use it as end-to-end testing. It's not exactly what it was used for, but you can shoehorn it to do that.
But in microservices, it could be end-to-end testing, right? So like Spotify or Netflix, both of them, they have tons of microservices inside, and they have aggregator services, right? And so what you can actually be doing for you want to end-to-end test from this service all the way up to this service. Maybe not all the way up to the UI of Spotify or the UI of Netflix. And so you can use JMeter to basically pound a REST endpoint, right? And pass it in a whole bunch of different variables and all that stuff. And JMeter can do that quite well, right? And can get into your response time. Like, am I meeting my SLAs around that response time? That's one of the nice parts about maybe moving everything to REST, right? Is I can just hit it with JMeter. I don't need something fancy. And then you only have to do like the final testing. You can test all the way up to the single page app, everything, all the REST stuff underneath, and then test at the single page app level, right? Yeah.
And it's easy. We just take our stress test and turn them down to a lower rate, and then that gives us the first acceptance test when we're starting to write recipes.
Right, sure. And they're reusable. And you can do basically your contract tests can you put it into JMeter and it becomes, right? That's what it is, because that's all microservices are in the end. It's a contract between services about what you're going to send and receive. And then you let the people who deal with CSS and all that crazy stuff figure out what they're going to do with the data they get. I don't care what it looks like. I'm just giving you data. Right.
Cool. What do we got? Yep, so we talked about these. Do it in the browser, emulator, JUnit, blah, blah, blah. All right, Steve, you're up.
Okay, so Jason and I gave the talk and basically ended last time we gave this talk, right before this slide.
We had demos, though.
We had demos showing the other types of tests. And then we read some articles by her name is Cindy. I don't know how to pronounce her last name.
Yeah,
You'll see it in a second. But she's done some really great blog posts, and it made us think about what does testing mean more and more in this day and age with microservices. And it got us to this. One does not simply test and consider their butts covered, right? And this is why I brought up that statement before about how many of you think you do testing so that you don't have problems in production, right? And yes, it'll avoid some problems, And what it actually comes down to, that's still not enough. And this is where I was saying before, is that microservices helped you reveal your flaw thinking before. So are most of you app devs? Yeah? You guys are like, stop moving heads now too. I can't even get words. Are most of you app devs? Yes, okay, thank you. So the idea is judging most of the age range in this group, you're somewhere around you came of age around the same time of me with apps. And what was some of the myths that we had when we were building apps? I'll give you one. The database will never go down. As long as I'm running, that database will always be there. I don't have to test to see if the database is going to go away. That's fine. The database will always be there. What's another one? Yeah, the network is always up. Whenever I need to make that request, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine, right? What's another one?
Users will always give us good info.
Yeah, users will. Well, I can sometimes test to make sure whether it's $1 or not, like it's got a .00. But other than that, what's another one?
Credentials always work.
What?
Oh,
The
creds.
good angels?
No, creds. So credentials.
Oh, the credentials will always work, and my credential service will always be up. Yeah?
The tester will send us also what are waiting for.
The tester will send you?
Like, for example, header injection, etc., cross-domain testing. So we think that we will receive the good.
Oh, you'll always
right,
receive
yeah.
good responses from stuff. Yeah? Yeah, the data will come through pure over the wire, right? Yeah? The requirements are going to be correct, yeah.
And they're not going to change either.
Or what's another, I mean, this is the other one that started with, it's okay. I'll repeat them. Is that okay? Or do you really want them to? Your mic is messing up. My mic is messing up? Sorry. I hate holding mic, though. All right, so then the other thing, what's another one is the disks will always be up. I've got a RAID 1 array. The data is always going to be there. My disks will never go away. And then another one that I think of is, I did all the JUnit tests. Everything will be perfect and we're covered all the test cases. How could things go wrong, right? And this is one of the things that microservices helps break apart, because you can't make those assumptions. Look, we can't live those lies anymore, right? That's part of what's happened. And that's what I think has been, people say, oh, microservices are so complicated. It's like, no, they're not that much more complicated. It's just you hid all your complication in the monolith before, right? And made assumptions that they were just going to be there. So why do we do this? To prevent downtime in our applications. That's the real reason we're doing testing in the real place, right? We don't want our app down. We don't want our users getting bad input. We're not testing because, well, some of us may be testing because my boss said I have to meet 90% test compliance on all my suite, on all my code. But the real reason we're doing tests is to bulletproof our stuff. So you can't test all the things, right? And this is what she starts talking about. So instead, you're planning for failure. Like when you build your app, assume it's going to fail so that you can learn from that failure and move on. Catch it, own it, and learn from it. How many of you, I'm hoping some of you at least, are doing blameless postmortems now? Or anybody, have you heard of blameless postmortems? Have you not heard of blameless postmortems? The idea of a blameless postmortem is you're doing the postmortem not to figure out who fucked up. You're doing the postmortem to figure out what went wrong and how do we prevent it in the future. Because then it totally changes the tone of your postmortem. It's not like I'm doing a CYA, right? Like, oh, well, it wasn't me, it was the database guys, right? Instead it becomes, wow, we never even thought of that. We should start testing for that in the future or capturing that, right? It treats everybody as having good intent and being competent, and that everybody makes mistakes, right? And that's what we're getting to with the testing now too. Yeah. Yeah, review and evaluation, not who messed this up, right? Or so stop thinking of testing as something you do pre-production is the main takeaway from this, right? The main thing is testing is happening all the time. You're always testing. Yes, you do some pre-production tests, but you don't stop once your thing goes into production. And that's where Chaos Monkey and Simian Army and those things start to come. Netflix has adopted this because they realize this stuff. So you're always learning. You as a group are always, both ops and engineering are learning. That's the whole DevOps model. You're always learning. We need to keep testing and learning throughout the life of the application. And this is her name. Cindy, I can't pronounce that. I'm very bad at those names. Sridan?
Cindy Sridharan.
There you go. Thank you. I just have a real hard time with those names. So that's her blog. and she also tweets. You should act.
Same Twitter.
Same
Yep.
Twitter, at copyconstruct, right? And she starts talking and laying some of this stuff out, and we thought it was really, after reading it, it was really important to include in this talk, right? So she talks about there's 2 phases to testing.
Oh, and when you start looking at her stuff, don't think this is going to be like a 5-minute read. Like, it goes on.
Yeah, I think she's writing a book now, doing her blog posts, but her blog posts are like in-depth, well-reasoned. They're phenomenal. Like you can't sit there and read them and not be changed by them. She talks about testing as 2 phases. There's the pre-production testing, which is all the stuff we just talked about. And then there's all the testing in production you need to do as well. Right? And so that's things like monitoring, doing canary deployments. Does anybody know what a canary deployment is? Yeah? Right? So that's another way of doing this testing in production.
I saw some heads saying no, they don't know what canary testing is.
All right, how many of you know what canary in a coal mine is? No? Okay, some people don't. And I've learned when I travel abroad, not everybody knows what canary. So for those of you who are not formally ruled by the British, canary in a coal mine is the British miners, when they would go down into a coal mine, you get coal out, but one of the other things you get is methane gas. And methane gas is odorless, tasteless, you just don't know it's there. Luckily for us, but unluckily for canaries, they're much more sensitive to methane gas than we are, and they will actually die before we will. So they would always bring a canary down with them, and if you were mining and you saw the canary stop singing and fall over, you knew it was time to get out of the mine, right? So what a canary testing is in production is you actually use live traffic, and you send a certain percentage of your live traffic to a small instance of what's going on. Am I doing that? That's all right.
Yeah.
It's been so long since I did this.
Similar
And then
to
you
an
watch
A/B
to see if
test,
it's dying there, and if it is, roll back, right? Rather than rolling all forward or rolling back, right? You do it with a canary test is live in production and seeing on a small percentage of live traffic, does it die or not? Sorry, I've talked about A/B testing and canary testing for so long, and sometimes I just forget. The A/B's up there as well. Does everybody know what A/B is? Yeah? This is something Netflix does a lot as well. You have a new service up. Rather than doing a small rollout and testing, you actually do, and watching and then keep going, you basically split off live traffic onto your new service and monitoring again, a key part, and you watch what happens. And if it's good and you're getting better responses, roll to the new version. If not, don't even do the B. Yeah?
My notes from last night are a little fuzzy here, so I might be wrong, but my rep was telling me something about doing data mirroring in OpenShift, where you simultaneously are sending traffic through your current production, and then you send an alternate stream through what you hope to put to production into a compare after.
Yes, or compare while it's going live. Right, it's not after the fact. That's the whole part about profiling and monitoring. Like, to do this stuff right, you have to have a whole infrastructure around that allows you to actually monitor and see what's happening. Yeah. Right, and yes, that's A/B. Right, that's A/B testing.
No users were ever subjected to B.
Oh, they weren't?
System will see that the same answer came back and bless it.
Oh, so that's like that's almost like an end-to-end test, yes. but actually running live in the cluster rather than in some test cluster. Right. What?
We used to call it parallel testing back in the 70s and 80s, right?
Yeah, nothing is ever new again. Right. Parallel testing. So you want to do the next one?
Sure. Do I need this? All right, that's just you. Your mic's screwed.
I get to be Phil Donahue.
Yep. All right, what does it look like? We've talked a lot about this. So we've got the pre-production stuff, and this expands what we had. So you've got stuff that you do during your deployment. You've got integration tests. You got tap compares where you just want to take a small little bit, make sure things are okay. Load tests, so that's going to be like your JMeter stuff and whatnot. You want to do that while you're deploying, make sure everything's good. Shadowing, so you're going to actually follow some live traffic around, see where it goes, see what's happening on. And config tests. How many people actually test their config to make sure that it's right? Couple of people.
We're giving you all sorts of new things to try when you get home. This is an action-packed session for you.
Then we've got release. We talked about canarying, monitoring, traffic shaping, feature flagging, or toggles. Does that sound familiar to people? Feature toggling.
Feature toggling means that you basically, with an environment variable, you can turn a feature on or off in your actual live code. So it's sitting there waiting to be used. If you want to use it, it's actually in your main code base, and you're just turning it on and off with a flag.
Yeah.
Sorry? what's the, FF4G? G. FF4G is a framework for doing that. See, more learning for when you get home.
That's right, we're both learning. I hadn't heard of that one before. Let's see, and then post-release. So all of these kinds of things. We mentioned chaos testing. Logs and events, very, very helpful. Especially in a microservice architecture, logging becomes very key. How difficult is it to go from service A to B to C to D and track that entire workflow? If you don't have consistent logging, and make sure you're tracking something that is specific to that visitor. If you don't have that, then there's really no point.
And again, this should have come up when you were thinking about how to build your app, because you knew your app was going to fail. So you're actually building things so you're like, oh, when things go wrong, this is how I will track that things have gone wrong. Not like, oh, things have gone wrong, how do I try to put that all back together again?
Right, yeah, after the fact, that's not very good. It looks like you had a question. Like I could see it right on the tip of your tongue. No? Okay, all right, yes?
I'm looking at any sort of isolation testing. Do you know, is that not a done thing anymore?
In this particular one, she didn't list it. That doesn't necessarily mean you can't do it, though. In this list, I would put that as that could live in pretty much any single one of those areas, right?
So we should probably get to the, we have like 1 minute left.
Are we out? Holy crap.
Yeah, no, we're not out. We have 1 minute, so don't leave.
Oh, cool. Actually, we're done.
We're done.
Yeah.
So again, that's the slide if you want to go back. And the only reason, the main reason I think you want to take a picture of this is so you can remember where her blog posts are. And I think one of the big takeaways I was hoping people would get from this is breaking their mindset from testing being everything pre-production. Because when you move to microservices, it really does have to move to more higher level. That's why I was saying your inverted pyramid is not necessarily the bad thing in a microservices way. And it has to much more be like using stuff like Jaeger or Dynatrace or something to be watching flows in real time, right?
Cool.
We can stay if there's other questions, but.
Yeah.